heart of where innovation, money, and power collide in Silicon Valley and beyond. This is Bloomberg Technology with Caroline Hyde and Ed Ludlow.
I'm Caroline Hyde at Bloomberg's World Headquarters in New York.
And I'm Ed Ludlow, also here in New York for the final time this week, and this is Bloomberg Technology.
And coming up, Ed, well, we're talking the cyber attack, of course, disrupting the U.S. Treasury market. The world's largest bank falling victim to a ransomware hack. We have the story.
Plus, Stability AI getting new backing from Intel. We talk about the cash infusion, which comes at a critical time for the company and AI at large, with none other than Andrew Ng, founder of Google Brain and co-founder of Corsair.
And Call of Duty's Modern Warfare 2. It brought in $1 billion in 10 days. How will Modern Warfare 3 perform? And how is a game about war helping real veterans in future employment? We talk to Activision Blizzard later in the hour.
Now our top story, ICBC, a China bank subject, according to sources, to a hack. That's a big one that we're watching. Why? Because it's mega. You think about the assets that bank controls, then it's going to have ramifications.
You're right, it's mega. To put it into context, the world's biggest bank, ICBC. And it's been hit, as you say, by a cyber attack, leaving the Chinese bank unable to clear US Treasury trades, forcing employees, get this, to send settlement details through a courier carrying a USB stick. Bloomberg's Sonali Basak going back to basics on technology for us for a moment. I mean, extreme events mean extreme moments with a courier, but ultimately it really reminds us how all-important cybersecurity is right now.
It is, and remember, this is not the first significant cyber attack we've really seen on some more critical infrastructure. In the financial industry, you've seen the same group here really target, or offshoots of this group target, a British fintech firm earlier this year when it came to the derivatives market. But the reason this is such a big deal is not just is it the world's largest bank by assets, it's also the most large, liquid, safe market in the world that was disrupted for a moment yesterday as we saw this attack happen.
Well, you were hanging out on social media this morning and going back, reading about ICBC, going back to 2017 and sharing articles. Put that research into context with the news overnight.
Yeah, the reason that this is such a big deal is, remember, that the market for treasuries has really broadened to include banks like ICBC, a massive Chinese bank in the U.S. Treasury market. So some of this is a treasury market structure issue. This is relevant to your audience, Ed, in the technology world, because there's a large debate on how treasuries should be cleared. ICBC has become a big clearing counterparty, as well as large in the repo lending market. These are repurchase agreements that really fuel the heart of the financial system and leverage in the treasury markets. But there's a big debate now on whether treasuries should be centrally cleared. This would be through a unit of the DTCC. A lot of fintech players are very closely associated with the DTCC because they care so much about the movement of different assets across the United States, let alone the world, across different types of assets. But if they are centrally cleared, then these cyber problems have a more concentration risk, don't they? And so there's a big question about what else is vulnerable besides ICBC here.
And the people behind this ransomware running it like a business. Extraordinary set of stories being put out by Bloomberg News. Sonali Basak, we thank you for the inside track of really what it meant for a key Chinese lender. And well, let's talk about AI in particular when it comes in the context of China. Artificial intelligence, of course, a big theme at this year's New Economy Forum. It's being held in Singapore, but Bloomberg spoke exclusively with Sinovation Ventures Chairman and CEO Kai-Fu Lee. AI pioneer, as he's known, has discussed the opportunities that artificial intelligence can create and the need for regulations. Just take a listen.
We wanted to be a global company. That's why we open sourced our best model to date. And that's what we announced this week. It's a 34B model that is the highest performance open source model for a large language model, exceeding Meta's Llama 2 by a significant margin. We believe open source will bring the world together. We think research is always about standing on the shoulders of giants, and we want to contribute from which we took.
Obviously, there's a lot of talk about this whole, I guess, race between AI, between U.S. and China here. How do you see this all playing out overall, and what really is at stake right now?
I think the likelihood, given where things are, which is regrettable, is we have two parallel universes. American companies will supply their products and technologies to the U.S. and other countries that want to use American products, and Chinese companies will build Chinese products for China and countries that will use Chinese products. So the reality is the American companies and Chinese companies are probably not going to compete all that much in the same marketplace.
But they'll probably have to compete on chip makers, right? So the U.S. administration has said that some of the higher tech chips cannot be sold to Chinese companies. What does it mean for your company?
Right, we saw this coming, so we actually stockpiled a lot of NVIDIA chips. So we're in good shape for about a year and a half. And I think the jury's out whether in a year and a half China can make equivalently or nearly as good chips. Time will tell.
And you're not just targeting China, but also global markets. I'm just wondering, how do you view the whole regulatory landscape right now when it comes to AI?
I think there clearly needs to be regulation because AI can be used in ways that are harmful. And I also think different countries will have somewhat different regulations, but hopefully there's enough commonality in them, so regulation is necessary. But also I think we shouldn't expect regulation alone to be enough, because a lot of these issues, hallucination, misinformation, harm, can and should be measured by technology. And we should let the technologists find a way to contain the technology, but not completely rely on them either. So it's really technology to provide the guardrail and detection and removal of harmful and illegal content, but working side by side with regulations.
At what point, do you think that it could actually disrupt innovation in some way? Are you concerned that the regulations could actually hurt innovation?
I think excessive regulation will hurt innovation, and I think we as a technology community are willing to take some hit and be slowed down somewhat for the good of humanity, but not so much so that will completely stifle innovation.
But how difficult is it? And this is one of the conversations that we try and have with policymakers. First of all, policymakers probably or regulators don't understand how quickly or how slowly this comes compared to someone like you and your expertise. So what's the biggest mistake that they could do now?
Well, I think a moratorium would be a huge mistake. It's not enforceable. And it's not going to be effective. You have to let technology move forward. I think things that they should do are to promote letting technologists work on fixing hallucination and other problems. And I think they should use existing laws to punish those who misbehave. For example, for spreading misinformation. We have laws in every country on that already. Just use them.
That was an exclusive interview with Sinovation Ventures Chairman and CEO Kai-Fu Lee at the Bloomberg New Economy Forum in Singapore. And he referenced NVIDIA, Caroline. It's the subject of the Tech Watch column today, talking about how its earnings ratio is less than the estimated growth rate and talking about valuation, which is an uncommon situation to be in. But I don't know if you saw the news 24 hours ago that basically the stock rose because it's working on 3 new AI chips specifically for China. And there, Kai-Fu Lee was basically saying NVIDIA is the only game in town right now. It remains to be seen if China can make its own chip.
And the fact that he'd stockpiled a load to get ahead of some of these restrictions. But going back to whether NVIDIA is expensive or not, what is it trading at? 35 times sales, which is like the most expensive on the S&P 500. But many analysts are saying this is actually relatively cheap now.
It's big, right?
Meanwhile, look, we just want to talk about another publicly traded company, Meta. The company is close, we understand, to reaching a deal that will bring its mixed reality headset to China through a partnership with Tencent. Now, according to sources, Tencent would manufacture a version of a headset using Meta's hardware specifications and software. Both Meta and Tencent didn't respond to a request for comment, but interesting that Meta are actually reaccessing the Chinese economy. From New York, this is Bloomberg Technology.
Stability AI is raising new financing led by chipmaker Intel. Stability raising just under $50 million in the form of a convertible note, that according to sources. The cash infusion coming at a pretty critical time for the company, which has recently shed more than half a dozen senior employees. A big story in the world of AI. Let's stick with the world of AI and bring in Andrew Ng, who founded Google Brain and deeplearning.ai, and is currently chairman and co-founder of Coursera, and of course an adjunct professor at Stanford in the field of AI. And welcome to the program, Andrew, and thank you for your time. I want to start with the reason that you're so talked about right now in the news, in the media, online, on social media, and it's a view that you hold that big tech is talking up the threat, the existential threat of AI for a particular reason. Could you outline your thesis to us?
So there's been a lot of fear about AI creating an existential threat to humanity, but I just don't get it. I don't see any plausible path by which AI will make humanity go extinct. But the notion that it could just creates a lot of fear. And unfortunately, this creates cover for lobbyists as well as some regulators to pass laws that I'm concerned will be very stifling on innovation and open source. And so I think it is in the interest of some of the big tech companies to let these regulations be passed to shut out open source that some large companies would very rather not compete with.
We've just had the AI summit in the UK where many would say perhaps it upped some of the fear-mongering. Are regulations as they're being formed the right ones?
I'm very concerned about the regulations being formed both in the United States as well as in the UK and Europe. One distinction, I feel like there's more of the AI existential risk fear in Europe than in the United States, but I'm concerned about regulations on both sides. So the White House had released an executive order just a couple of weeks ago in which it's starting to put in place reporting requirements and maybe other requirements about models that are very powerful. And I'm very concerned if we're on a path to outlaw open source software, or at least pass regulations that make it so difficult for people to write open source software, free software for anyone to build on, which has been an amazing contribution to the world and is a key for how innovators and startups compete and build.
There was a lot of interest from our audience about you coming on, and I think probably the most common question was for you to explain how you see the intersection of deep learning, machine learning, neural networks impacting jobs. You know, this debate of displacement versus being an assistant based on all of the research and development currently happening.
So it turns out that AI doesn't automate jobs. I know that the whole discussion has been, will AI automate jobs? But I think a more useful analysis is not to think of AI as automating jobs, but as AI automating tasks. So what my teams do is we actually take jobs, break them down into tasks. For example, a radiologist reads X-rays, communicates with patients, gathers patient histories, mentors more junior radiologists, and on and on and on. And then to take all those tasks and figure out where are the AI opportunities. One of my friends, Eric Brynolfsson and others, had pioneered this technique. And it turns out that, I think I misspoke, AI does automate a tiny number of jobs in whole, but the majority of the time you find that for someone's job, maybe AI can make them, 20% more productive or 30% more productive, which means that they are still needed, but with AI, they can be more productive. I don't mean to minimize the suffering of this much smaller number of people whose jobs will go away, but it turns out also that if you look at most waves of innovation, companies end up pursuing growth more than cost savings because you can only save so much money. Cost savings is nice, but the revenue growth has no limit. And so most companies will end up doing more of that.
And companies need to reskill, and that's where Coursera comes in. How much demand have you seen? How much ability to satiate that demand have you been able to give?
So I think Coursera have been privileged to serve many enterprises wanting to reskill their teams. In fact, just about a week ago, we launched a new course, Generative AI for Everyone. I think with this fear and uncertainty, as well as massive upside, we wanted to teach something online to help everyone learn to use generative AI in your own day-to-day life, for personal things or for work, as well as figure out how this will impact your job or your business. So Generative AI for Everyone launched on Coursera just over a week ago. It was actually the fastest growing course on Coursera this year with, I think, 43,000 learners signed up in the first 7 days. So I think there's a lot of interest to learn about generative AI and to understand how to use it yourself, how this may affect your job, and how this may affect your business or your industry vertical.
Andrew, this week we've been digesting Grok and the work that Elon Musk's done in generative AI. What is your assessment?
I saw it drop from afar. I've not played with it myself yet. I think this is a sign of the rapid explosion of AI technology. Just last week, OpenAI had a developer conference. It was exciting. Elon Musk released Drop. I think you just had Kai-Fu Lee on that released another open source model. So this explosion of technology tools. And what will happen is with better tools, it opens up opportunities for businesses and startups to build a lot more applications that just were not possible before. And so I think that with better tools, the application layer, not the media tends to talk about tools because with new technology, that's exciting. People want to hear from the tooling companies. But tooling companies will be successful only if the applications built on top of them are even more successful and generate even more revenue so they can afford to pay the tooling companies. So while I think companies like NVIDIA are brilliant and AMD and Intel, for them to succeed, someone has made even more money to keep paying for these GPUs. And so I'm excited about the applications we built.
Optimism. Coursera chairman, co-founder Andrew Ng, as well as a wealth of other titles. Professor, we thank you for your time. It's a revenue intelligence platform, Gong, and it's launching a new AI-powered forecasting tool to help the CFOs, the CROs out there basically forecast revenue, bringing the understanding gained from, get this, more than 300 buying signals across more than 3 billion customer interactions actually captured on Gong's platform. Amit Bendorf, we're pleased to say CEO, co-founder of Gong, joins us now. So how much more efficient at predicting does this make people?
Our testing have shown that it's 21% on average more effective and more accurate than traditional methods. Traditionally, companies have been relying on statistical models and some internal systems. Using the voice of the customers and customer sentiment with AI creates much better results.
I mean, who are we comparing this with? Is this like sort of lead generation chasing a la CRM and Salesforce? Or is this kind of more like Databricks and the data lake product that they're doing out there with prediction? Who are you trying to beat here?
It's neither. Traditional companies have been using spreadsheets to understand how much they're going to sell this quarter or next quarter using a variety of sources, anywhere from internal systems, weather forecast, traditional sales records, and mostly sentiment of the sales departments, the best judgments, which isn't very good, especially like in these challenging time with the macro and geopolitical situation. What Gong does, it taps into conversations of companies with their customers, and it listens to what customers are saying. Are they likely to buy? What's their sentiment? What are the budgets that they have? And turns all of this into insights that are immediately fed into predictions so companies can understand their changes to their forecast in near real time.
Amit, what's your moat here? You can obviously integrate Salesforce data within Gong, for example. How do you ensure that some of these big players aren't able to replicate what you've just built?
Well, everybody can try to replicate anything, but we're sitting on over like 3 billion customer interaction. We've been training the models for years, specifically for that particular case, and it's not something that is easy to replicate.
So, Emmy, the aim is to improve the accuracy of forecasting. How does it work? How does AI help you do that?
Well, you need to scan through vast amounts of customer information. For every customer that a company has, what are they saying or what are they not asking? If they're not asking about pricing, maybe that's a negative signal. If they're talking about like frozen budget, that's a negative signal. All of that is understood by the AI to create a model that actually predicts what the projection is going to be. So you look at customer by customer, bottom up, and understand how likely they are to buy, how much they're likely to spend, and then you combine all of that into a prediction. The importance is that companies can now use that either to update their forecast, to plan their hiring and their spend accordingly.
You mentioned geopolitics making it harder to forecast. Now, we only have a minute left, but I just want to ask you, how are your workforce currently in Israel? How is the company able to ensure protection at this time?
Well, overall, The impact on the business has been minimal. We have about 10% of people being drafted, but everybody's working extra hard. Emotionally, it's like very difficult for people. Everybody's still traumatized by the atrocity of October 7th, and there are still over 200 hostages with babies. So these are difficult times, but the spirit is super high. The amount of volunteering and citizen activity is super high.
And we thank you for your time as well. Amit Bendoff, CEO and co-founder of Gone. Thank you.
Welcome back to Bloomberg Technology. I'm Caroline Hyde in New York.
And I'm Ed Ludlow in San Francisco. There are more
No, you're not.
Oh my goodness. I've fallen for it again. You got me. I'm here in New York City. Here are some technology stories moving in the markets. Let's start with Trade Desk. A 2-day chart for a visual representation of what's a big story. Down 18% in the session, on track for its biggest drop since May of 2022. This is an ad technology platform. It gave a weak forecast for the current period. It also hit the names like Meta, Snap that have such ad-dependent businesses, but it's a big move. It's got us thinking about the health of the advertising business overall. A big theme for the show today is also going to be Alphabet, the parent company of Google. We know that Sundar Pichai is going to testify next week. That's more around the App Store story, but in the European Union, as Kara's about to tell us, there is also a lot of regulatory scrutiny as well, and thinking, what does Google do next to kind of revamp its business in that market? Here I am in New York City.
And let's talk about the EU for a moment, because look, Google has been pressured by the European Union regulators. It's made an effort to beef up the quality of its search engine. At least that's the word according to the internal documents by the US Justice Department. DOJ claims Google's failure to willingly make improvements, it proves it's illegally maintaining a monopoly. This comes amid news that Alphabet CEO Sundar Pichai will testify next week in a separate antitrust fight with Epic Games. Boy, there's a lot going on. Sarah Forden can help us break it down. So what are we on, the 9th week now in this particular set of investigations coming from the DOJ?
Yes, that's correct. This is ending the 9th week in the Google search trial in Washington, D.C., and that is expected to wrap up next week, probably Wednesday or Thursday of next week with the final testimony. But we're not expecting to get a ruling in this case until early in the new year. The judge has put off closings until January or sometime around the new year. And so it's still going to take a long time to see what the final conclusion of this trial is going to be.
This has been a year where CEOs taking the stand in a trial becomes big news. Just tee up next week for us and why we care that Sundar Pichai is going to be speaking in that particular trial.
Yes, so on the other coast, we have the antitrust trial between Epic and Google Play. And Sundar Pichai is going to be on the stand on Tuesday. And he's going to be asked about the practices of the App Store. And Epic is alleging that Google's practices in terms of distribution, in terms of pricing, in terms of fees are anti-competitive.
And yet, as Ed has pointed out, despite all of this ferocious investigation and eyes from regulators, the shares managed to weather it. Sarah, from investors' perspective, does this matter? Does it carry weight?
Well, I mean, obviously this is a giant company with a lot of business around the world, but it takes a very long time for these antitrust cases to play out. And as I said, we won't get a ruling until next year, and it will be sometime after that to find out if the judge finds that Google is violating antitrust laws. The whole process to even find a remedy will go to another trial, which also could take multiple weeks. So it seems very far off at this moment from the point of view of investors in the market.
All right, Bloomberg's Sarah Forden, thank you so much. We're going to stick with this story, but get more insight from Sarah Olam, who's a senior fellow at the Technology Policy Institute. Sarah, great to have you back on the show. Let's ask this to start. We've outlined the situation in Europe. We outlined the situation on the West Coast, where I am currently not. I'm here in New York City. Do these processes running in parallel as a researcher compound? Do you think they will take notice of each other in terms of how it can impact Google?
Well, in terms of Judge Amit Mehta in the D.C. District Court, he's probably focused on his trial, but in terms of just the questions around competition and how dynamic the different markets are, I think people will be watching both trials. What's interesting is this type of antitrust case, it reminds of prior cases like Microsoft and AT&T, at least in the D.C. District of Columbia courthouse. So whatever comes out of this decision will be watched by a lot of people.
And some of the little bits of intricacies of data, of points of fact have been fascinating, Sarah. But overall, what seems to be so hard to prove is it's kind of the counterfactual, right? What it would have looked like if, well, they hadn't been acting in this way, and if ever it would ever have been deemed not monopolistic or not. Can you just articulate how difficult it is to understand whether Google has been playing as a key competitor here or ultimately been monopolistic in its actions?
That's exactly right. I think the counterfactual is the question. So you don't know what could have been. And businesses make decisions, product decisions all the time. So just last week in the case, they were looking at the EU choice screen. And so in the EU, they required another page before the default browser. And so now users in Europe have to pick between a whole page of different browsers. That kind of product decision, it's not frictionless. It makes it harder for users to get to a browser. And so you always have to ask, well, the businesses make decisions to streamline the flow of their products. And so what would have been is a great question.
On the West Coast, in the Epic Games fight, is there any significance that Sundar Pichai, the CEO, the kind of spearhead of the company, is testifying?
Yes, so it's interesting that, they're calling him in as a witness for that case as well. What's fascinating is just seeing how these cases are pulling back the curtain on business decisions. There's so many pieces of information that Google has to decide from to make their product competitive. And just looking at the different slide decks and the business data is really fascinating. Not anyone can be making those decisions, and Google, they have people inside who are looking at all the different options and picking what serves their product.
And not many can be paying the billions to other companies to ensure that they remain in a specific spot on a front screen. It's the whole timing of it all is fascinating with AI as well. Sarah Lamb, just brilliant to have you on the show as ever, Senior Fellow at Technology Policy Institute. Now, coming up, we're going to be taking a moment to reflect on Veterans Day. In particular, we're going to be doing that with two key people, GoDaddy founder, Vietnam veteran himself, Bob Parsons, and also Call of Duty manager, Joanna Faries. We'll understand why next. This is Bloomberg Technology. On this Veterans Day, we take a moment to remember and honour members of the military, which both the Nasdaq and the New York Stock Exchange observed with 2-minute moments of silence earlier today. On this day, we want to bring in GoDaddy founder Bob Parsons. He himself, a U.S. Marine Corps Vietnam veteran, a recipient of the Purple Heart Medal, Combat Action Ribbon, and Vietnamese Cross of Gallantry. And Bob, we know you in the world of technology. We know you for GoDaddy, for, of course, web hosting. It made you a billionaire. With that money, you've been giving back to something that we should know you more for, perhaps, which is, of course, your service. How are you giving money? What sort of amounts are you giving as well?
Well, we give back money. Our goal is to donate $1 million every other week, and we do that. We try to support veterans organizations, and we try to support a lot of organizations where they're having difficulty raising funds, and they are, it would be just us if we support them. So, you look for an organization like that, you'll find us.
Those that are LGBTQ within service, those that are looking towards psychedelics for help, those, of course, you think Semper Fi is one particular company, Team Rubicon, another one you support. I'm interested in, you're trying to tackle sort of loneliness here as well. What is it that technology can't solve for veterans, Bob?
Well, technology is never going to, I don't think is ever going to touch PTSD. Or It won't be in our lifetimes, that's for sure, because there's so many things that go with this. First is the loneliness that comes with it, and it's brutal. And it's a lot of the loneliness is self-imposed because, with PTSD, you never feel like you belong, no matter who or where you're with, or that you even want to belong. And that is one of the worst things. And then, to boot, it comes with a flash temper, sometimes depression, up to severe depression, that sort of thing.
Bob, you founded GoDaddy in the late 90s. You sold Parsons to Intuit. You have this kind of deep relationship with tech. How does that expand out to the armed forces? Do you employ a lot of veterans? What relationship does GoDaddy have, for example, with the armed services?
Well, I'm no longer affiliated with GoDaddy. Haven't been since 2019. So I don't know what they're doing now. But I can tell you in my companies, and I have 13 of them now, we employ veterans as much as we can. Matter of fact, my assistant, Francisca Sanchez, she's been with me going on 22 years, and she was a corporal in the Marine Corps when I hired her.
GoDaddy founder Bob Parsons, on this Veterans Day, really thank you for your time here on Bloomberg Technology. Now I actually want to keep with Veterans Day and talk to Joanna Ferry, Senior Vice President, General Manager of Call of Duty over at Activision Blizzard. It is a big day because Modern Warfare 3 is now live worldwide, but you also have in-game packs, specifically through the Call of Duty Endowment, Joanna, that aim to take proceeds from the sales of those packs and then help put veterans into jobs. Just explain the process to us.
Yeah, that's exactly right. The Warrior Pack goes on sale today. And it's part of our Call of Duty Endowment commitment, which we've been doing for many, many years. It's near and dear to our hearts, and all the work and service, obviously, that military servicemen and women have been doing to protect our freedoms and allow us to make great video games. It's been an incredible partnership and extension of everything that Call of Duty stands for. The Warrior Pack is a great way for our community to also dive in and show support and help veterans get quality employment and opportunities after their military service.
Joanna, give us some sense of the data about how Modern Warfare 3 is doing. You guys like to flex that the last title made $1 billion in about a week or 10 days. Are you on track for that as well?
Well, it's too early to call any numbers for sure. Today is launch day, but it's such a special moment for Modern Warfare 3. It's been awesome. I mean, even seeing so many millions of players already pouring in and saying it's some of the best Call of Duty they've either ever seen or seen in years is exactly what puts the cherry on top of, a years-long effort. I think the other piece, to your point about last year, we all know how record-breaking Modern Warfare 2 was. We've been years at work listening to player feedback, saying that they wanted to spend more time in the series. And so this was a conversation we've been having for many, many years about, can we deliver a blockbuster premium title that's back-to-back in terms of sequel and narrative, and also bring iconic multiplayer offerings, iconic net new offerings for zombies players. So in many ways, Modern Warfare 3 is this amazing sort of nostalgic meets new innovation gameplay party for all things Call of Duty. It's been very intergenerational in that way. It's been a special moment for all of us.
And it came very quickly. What was the pressure put on, put on perhaps, to get it out so swiftly after the second?
It was really no different than, we're celebrating our 20th anniversary. So when you think about it, in many ways, some of the secret ingredient to Call of Duty's powerhouse blockbuster chops of bringing premium releases year after year has been part of how we think about development, creative, narrative. The big difference on this one was much more so, how do we combine what is arguably one of the best multiplayer maps offering in terms of bringing back iconic favorites, modernizing them for a new generation, but also pouring in an incredible zombies element that has never seen its way into into Modern Warfare. It's open world, it's expansive, so zombies players are now getting some kind of flex that they haven't usually seen. And what we've also seen is carry forward this new endeavor that we also talked about for many years, about if we're going to go back to back with two big blockbuster premium releases within the Modern Warfare franchise, how can we honor the player investment? So if you already were in on Modern Warfare 2, now there's so much element of carry forward where a lot of that gameplay and a lot of those weapons and engagement elements from last year are going to carry into this year instead of forcing players to have to reset, which was really what we would argue was the model of yesteryear. So we were signaling this big shift in how we were thinking about content releases, even last year. And, it's been many, many years in the making, and it's just a tip of the hat of how Call of Duty is such an incredible content engine.
Joanna, to Caroline's point, Bloomberg did report overnight that the development time for Modern Warfare 3 was about 18 months from sort of conception to today. Traditionally, it's 3 years to turn around a game like this, right? Was that the timeline that you worked to?
No, that's wholly inaccurate. But, I understand, journalists or other people from the outside may be looking in and make some assumptions or speculate on how this is done. But like I said, I've been a part of the Call of Duty organization for now 5 years, and just seeing how incredible the architecture around development has become. Like I said before, we had been seeing for many years players asking for, more engagement, deeper extensions in the series that they were spending so much time in. And so I think Modern Warfare 3, in addition to it being this incredible foray of, blockbuster, premium, rich content, you can kind of pick your own adventure in so many different ways, but also bringing back some modernization to iconic favorites is a beautiful kind of combination on the backdrop of our 20th anniversary. It speaks to Call of Duty can release, blockbuster premium titles year on year like no one else.
Yes.
But we can also really extend the conversation and think differently about how we rally our development teams to make magic happen.
Joanna, before we run out of time, there are two big audience questions, your gameplay questions, which are, what are you doing about anti-cheat programs? And also cross-console play, no PC is kind of the request.
We get a lot of requests. Part of being this big and working at the scale that we do is that we have an incredible community, and they're very passionate and very vocal. So we're always taking notes. But with respect to anti-cheat, couldn't be prouder. I mean, the Ricochet initiative is 24/7, multi-year, endeavor for us, where we've really prioritized integrity and making sure that we're always on. We just announced as well some of our more machine learning technology that we're pouring in as an investment to deliver protection for our players with respect to cheating and hacking at scale, in addition to what we're doing with, our human resources who are always on in terms of this battle. We know it's a battle that's, never going to end. You have to be very sophisticated and ahead of the curve on many of the things that we'll see. But it's an incredible initiative. We're really happy with the investments we're making in that regard.
Joanna Ferris, thank you for your time, Senior Vice President and General Manager of Call of Duty at Activision Blizzard.
Okay, time for going viral. The actors' strike might have ended, but the impact is still being felt. For the second time in 2 weeks, Disney has overhauled its schedule of film releases, announcing delays to movies like Deadpool and Captain America. Plus, later today, we'll hear from the Screen Actors Guild at a press conference about the new deal. Bloomberg's Felix Gillette joins us on set. Yeah. So let's start with the delays, right? I think there's relief that the 118-day strike is over. But the content slate is still in question here going forward.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of movies being delayed, but also I think more broadly, you're going back, the era of peak TV that Hollywood was in for the past couple of years, that's over, right? We're going back to a much leaner time.
Ultimately, what pushes back, what causes these delays? It's because, fewer actors needing to go to too many projects all at the same time. Mm-hmm. How difficult is this to make this streamlined?
It is going to be difficult. There's going to be a big pile up. But I think, the promotion machine of Hollywood is going to snap back into gear. So I think everybody's feeling relief about that. Now the stars can go back and actually promote these movies that are coming out, in December. Already you see Brie Larson's going to hop on The Tonight Show to promote The Marvels, which is out this weekend. So I think that will help just be able to, publicize these shows and movies.
The finer details have all been ironed out, but yeah. I think ultimately what will change in the shooting of these movies from the renegotiation of contracts, ultimately we're also waiting for Teamsters and others to then potentially take to the streets not soon away.
Well, in broad strokes, the two things they finally worked out were AI protections and compensation for hit movies and TV shows on streaming services. So those were the final two sticking points. We don't know the details yet, but I think what they've said is that the actors will have some consent over their use of AI-generated images of themselves, and also that there will be a pool of compensation created from hit streaming movies and TV shows that will then be distributed to the actors.
And Felix, real quick, essentially the presser later, this is just ratification, a procedural thing, right?
Yeah, they just need to, there's 160,000 members of this union that will have to ultimately vote on the fine points. But I think that's largely given that it will pass.
Well, one thing that we're all looking forward to maybe is seeing some new content on the slate. Felix Gillette, we thank you so much for all things to do with Hollywood. But look, that does it for this particular edition of Bloomberg Technology. And for Ed's time right here in New York, I'm sad to say. You're going back to the West Coast, not Hollywood though, but SF.
It has been a good week in New York City. I've enjoyed it here. I am going back to San Francisco. Big week ahead, APEC, a lot of big names in town. But it was a big show. Recap on the podcast. Thank you for listening wherever you get yours, on the Bloomberg platforms, Apple and Spotify and iHeart. For the final time this week from New York City, this is Bloomberg Technology.